Everybody, Crystal Gilkey here for our monthly Virtue and Praise Book Club meeting. And this, well, it's actually for June's month. We have special guest author J.L. Pattison, and he is from Tennessee. He's a family man. He's got 6 children. He likes to fish. He's Southern, so he likes his sweet tea and lattes. Let's see, he is an award-winning author of Libertopia. Am I saying that right? Yes,
That's correct.
Libertopia Best Fiction Award, and he won that 2 years in a row. He's also a freelance writer with nonfiction articles and essays all over various online publications. He spent 25 years as a private and criminal investigator. Is that
That's
correct?
correct.
Okay.
Mhm.
And he's been on numerous podcasts. He's even been on TV. And I thought this was interesting on Murder by Numbers. You were a guest, made a guest
That's correct.
appearance on that as well. So, uh, very interesting. So, why don't you tell us first how you got started in writing, how you made that jump from investigator to author?
Well, first, I just want to say thank you for having me. Second, I did want to make a correction. I live in the Tennessee Valley, but in Alabama.
Oh, okay.
So, and I'm not originally from Alabama, and I'm sure with all the college sports down here, they take their locations very. It's very
Yes.
pride. There's a lot of pride in there, so I
Yes.
don't want to misrepresent Tennessee when I'm
Uh-oh.
actually just south of the border. So how I got started in writing. I've always been a writer. Even when I was younger, loved to write. I remember an English class in middle school. I didn't have good grades, and so I was offered to write stories for extra credit. So I was like, I can do that. So I wrote crazy stories like the sausage and eggs, the attacking a city, and just crazy stuff like that. But I just wrote. So I didn't take it seriously in the sense where I always thought I always said I was going to write. Like everybody, almost everybody out there has a book in them that one day I'm going to write it. One day I'm going to write it. And so finally, I just did it. I don't even know what was that triggering point, but I finally just said I'm done talking about it, and it was time to do it.
And was that while you were still working as an investigator or?
Correct, correct. And I retired just based on years, and moved down here to Alabama. So
Okay. Where did you move from? Where you
at the time, I was in. Well, I've lived in 4 different states, but at the time, I was living in Nevada,
Oh, wow.
which is
Okay.
why I don't have a Southern accent.
So what type of writing do you enjoy? Did you start off first publishing your book, or did you start off with articles or essays or?
Oh well, in my line of work, I wrote a lot of reports. They, I, I couldn't even tell you how many words I've written. Um, and then I was also writing for blogs, and I ran a blog that was fairly successful for many years, and did a lot of writing on that. It was an apologetics blog, and retired that after a while, after several years. And it wasn't until about 2015 when I moved into the fiction genre.
Awesome. So what do you enjoy writing most? Do you enjoy the the book process more or the blog article?
I I enjoy them both in different aspects. What I've tried, and I don't know, maybe some writers out there can relate to this. I find it easier to write nonfiction, and I write on Medium and Substack, and you can find my nonfiction there. And I find it easier to write nonfiction because I think it uses a different part of the brain in which you're collecting information and facts that are already there, putting them together in a coherent manner in which you can relay that information to the reader. Where fiction, you have to create and
Mhm.
you have to draw from nothing and create those words, those ideas, those stories, that plot. So for me, that's more exhausting. That just seems to like drain me more and takes more energy and more work. It's more laborious mentally to create fiction than it is nonfiction. But I do like them both, and it just depends. Seriously, it just depends on the mood I'm in or what's hot on the topic right now that I want to write about.
Right. For your nonfiction, do you write more? I know you said you wrote um, some apologetics. Do you write lean more towards like biblical, or is it political or writing? What topics do you write on?
Well, I do write on a variety of different subjects and topics because I just whatever suits my fancy at the time. But I do have I don't really get into politics in the sense where a lot of people would assume when you hear politics they think um, you know, Republican versus Democrat, Trump versus Biden. More of my politics is a libertarian slant. I think all politics is just theater, and I think we're worse off no matter who's in office. So my politics is more of the kind that it's dealing with more beyond just that surface level of who's got an R or a D next to their name. So, like a couple of my articles, I did fairly well. I wrote one entitled 25 Facts About Lee Harvey Oswald. I know another one on the JFK assassination I wrote was 13 people who had foreknowledge of JFK's assassination. So that kind of stuff fascinates me to write about, that kind of history, but not just the history that we learned in school, because most of that is not actually accurate or true. And so, as they say, the victor writes the history. I'm fascinated by real history, good or bad, whether it makes us look good or makes us look bad. It doesn't matter to me. I just want the truth. So I
Right.
like to write on that stuff. I, one of my satirical articles, which was something to the effect. It was back when uh, that dentist had went on a safari and shot a lion. I think Cecil the Lion was the name, and the whole world lost its mind because this dentist killed. I don't know if you remember that story, but I wrote a parody, a satire article on that, uh, tying that in with the abortion issue and talking about 10 reasons I've decided to become pro-choice, and I kind of juxtaposed that with lion killing, the killing of a lion, and so that went viral, or as viral as it could at that time. Got shared a lot. Was featured on Wretched TV and Wretched Radio and stuff like that. So whatever suits my fancy, I'll write about. It could be any of those things. It could be I've talked about books and on the writing craft itself. So it kind of runs the gamut. There's not one particular thing that I just write on.
I noticed, well, I've started reading, oh, now I can't remember the title of it.
Of the book,
What's, yeah, what's
The
the
Man Who
title?
Thought He Could Fly. The Man Who Thought He Could Fly.
The Man Who Thought He Could Fly, and it's
Correct.
12 stories. Is that right? Into
Correct.
one. Yeah. And
Yeah.
so I started reading
The
it, and
collection.
it's, yeah, collection. And you can tell there's some undertones of faith. And although on your website you don't proclaim yourself to be like Christian writer, Christian author, so which is fine. Um, how do you for those, I have several in my group who are wanting to write, and some are like they want to write, but they don't want it to like punch people in the face. Like, I'm a Christian.
Sure.
So how do
Sure.
you incorporate faith into your writing when you don't want to just be like, bam?
Yeah, that's actually a very good question, and it's not easy to accomplish. When it's done well, it's remarkable. When it's done poorly, it's embarrassing. And The reason to just to start from the beginning of your question, the reason I don't market myself as a Christian author is because I believe it comes with a negative connotation, or at least it comes with an expectation that I'm not going to meet. And I'll give you an example. If when people hear Christian fiction, they assume that it's going to be about angels and demons fighting a battle for someone's soul. It's going to be very poor theologically and doctrinally. It's going to be an Amish romance, or it's going to have something to do with an end times eschatological battle. And so I don't fit into those categories. So you tend to get that when you hear Christian fiction, that's usually what people are thinking about. My stories are completely unique. I don't think anywhere in Christian fiction you will find stories like mine. And that doesn't mean, because I know there are people that try to market themselves as edgy. And so, we're not your typical Christian book. We're going to throw some profanity in there and, throw some edgy stuff so we can be market to a broader audience. Mm-hmm. And I don't find that to be, that's not for me. I'm sorry. If I'm reading a Christian book, or it's known as a Christian book, or its author is Christian, then I would expect there not to be profanity in it. There shouldn't be sexual stuff in it. And if there's violence, it should be just for the purpose of the story, not gratuitous. And that's my standard. My books I deal with sometimes gritty topics. My book, The Island, for example, deals with terrorism, governmental conspiracies, war. But yet, I deal with it in a manner in which younger readers can read it. And the problem you have with that is sometimes when we sanitize stuff too much, it becomes hokey. Mm-hmm. And for me, I don't need to have a character spew a litany of profanities on the pages of a book to show you he's the bad guy or he's the villain. For me, and this is me personally, I know some people may disagree, but for me, I think that's lazy writing. Because if you're trying to show this guy is bad or whatever the situation is, so let me just have him drop a few F-bombs. Mm-hmm. I don't think that's necessary. So my villains can be very bad, but they don't have to use profanity. Sex, I don't find there's any reason for that to be in my books. I'm not writing romance anyway. And what little bit, if there is, because I do plan on having a love story in one of my upcoming collections, but that doesn't need to have that in there. So at least if you're reading it, you're not being shocked by that. Mm-hmm. And when it comes to violence, that's another thing. My violence is very minimal. I believe the old adage that less is more. And like in the old days, if you remember the old TV shows, the guy would, or movies or whatever, in the old black and white, the guy would go into the room with the gun and you'd hear a gunshot. And then maybe you'd hear something hit the floor. That was it. Nowadays, they want to show and be graphic with all the stuff, even in books and Christian books. Mm-hmm. So it's disappointing to me because when I see something that is supposedly a Christian book, if I don't feel I can give it to my children to read, then I don't think that's appropriate. So for me, and I may have completely gotten off your original question, and I think I have because I don't even remember what it was at this point. But for me, I deal with the faith aspect that I'm not typical. Okay, that's what it was. Now we're back. Typically, I'm not gonna write as you would expect most Christian books to be, because I think, unfortunately, there's a negative connotation with fiction, the quality of fiction, if you will, in Christian markets. And I know we're very forgiving. A lot of times Christian music is subpar. Christian
movies,
books are subpar. Christian books, right. And they can be subpar. The quality isn't there. So for me, if to put the title Christian on it, right up in center, it's already going to alienate a ton of people that are going to go, oh, this is a bad movie, it's a bad book, it's a bad song, and you couldn't make it in the real world, so you just slapping Christian on the cover so you try to sell that. And for me, that's not my approach. So I try to tell a good story, period, end of story. Because here's the thing: if you have a message, and everybody has a message, whether they even Stephen King has a message. It's a warped message, and it's a message that it's a bad message, but he has a message. So I have a message. You have a message. Everybody that's writing, you have stuff you have picked up in life that you want to convey to other people. And so my stories do have messages, but I feel that what we do in the Christian realm is we often sacrifice the quality and the entertainment value of why we read fiction to escape for the sake of driving that message home. So if you have a hammer to beat, and then you try to say, well, how can I build a story around that hammer? You're doing it wrong. You've got to be able to build the story first and foremost to entertain the reader and to make it worth their while, and then interweave that message in there. And so my promise, or my goal, is that no reader will ever get my book and be disappointed that it wasn't entertaining, and it wasn't thought provoking, and it wasn't of good quality. I want to first entertain. And if you're familiar with the Twilight Zone, then you'll easily pick up on my influences, because that was a great influence of mine growing up as a kid. The reruns, of course, I didn't watch it when it first aired. I wasn't born yet. But I feel, and this is why I feel this way, is that if you were to ask someone to pick up a book on a certain topic, whether it's a book on theology or a book on libertarianism, or you name it, if they're not interested, they're not going to read that book. However, if you couch the concept of what you want to convey in the form of fiction, people will pick that up. Mm-hmm. And I know it sounds sneaky, but our opponents do it all the time. Every TV show, not every TV show, but a lot of television, a lot of movies, a lot of books have subversive messages in it, but they couch it in entertainment. So because they do that, you accept it, you digest it, and it becomes part of you because you took it in as entertainment. But if someone said, hey, read this book on whatever sin we're pushing this month, read this book on it, and to support that sin, you'd be like, no, I'm not interested. But when you sit down and watch a half-hour show on TV, and that same sin is presented to you in a comedic fashion, and you find yourself laughing, you're now accepting that ever so slightly. And then week after week after year being entertained by that stuff, for some people, their thought processes change.
Yeah.
Well, why as Christians can't we do the same thing? Problem is, because we try to force the message up in front and up in center, and forget the entertainment value, forget the quality. So my concept is, no, I want to tell you a good story. I want you to put that book down and think about that story later, regardless of the topic. And so first and foremost, you have to be able to engage the reader. And then you interweave your message in there. So that's what I strive to do in all my stories. And I hope that answered it, because I sure did talk a lot now. So I'll put it back to you.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
That was great. That was great. Well, I think that really comes to knowing like your purpose in writing and knowing your audience, because like your audience and my audience are different. Like I write purposely for Christian moms or Christian teens or Christian grandmas. Like it's the story for those women. It's Christian romance. But with yours, your speculative fiction, I mean, it's a whole different purpose, message, audience. So I think that's important, like for authors to know before you even start writing, like why are you writing and who are you writing for? So it makes perfect sense.
Well, you can definitely convey more in fiction than you can in a book. So if, say, you're writing a book about motherhood, maybe, or homeschooling or whatever, If you have a book that's for moms and homeschooling, who's going to pick that up? Only anyone that's interested in moms and homeschooling.
Mm-hmm.
But if you have that in a story, whatever the fiction story is about, and you can interweave that concept of moms and homeschooling, which I don't know if I would really have to think about how to do that. But if you could do that, you could have someone pick up that book that would never pick up your book otherwise, be entertained by the story, and have those seeds of truth planted in them as they read.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I'll tell you one quote from Rod Serling, creator of Twilight Zone, and I don't remember it verbatim off the top of my head, but he dealt with censors a lot back in the 1960s, and so he said that with his stories, he can make Martians say something he's not allowed to make Democrats or Republicans say. So in his story, if he says this is Democrat, Republican says this, it would be you couldn't say that.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, he didn't live long enough to see the world we're in now and what's being said. But what he would do is he would put his message and he would replace them with a Martian, as we would call it, and you can now tell that story without offending the censors. So that's the concept that I aim for as well. I want you to understand what I'm saying, and I want you to see my way. But if I tell you about it, beat you on the head with it, whatever, you're not going to accept it. But if I tell it in the story of maybe a sequel Animal Farm with a bunch of sheep that are trying to enact a new law on the farm, that's entertaining. And by the time you get to the end, you get the message, you're entertained, and you understand the message better.
And I would have to say, I mean, after reading several of the stories in your book, you do that. Like they're very good, very entertaining, and very thought provoking. The animal one kind of made me a little queasy. I'm just a very visual, so like when it's talking, I won't give it away, but anyways, it's very, very good. All right, so what is the best, which you've been given some really good tips for writing, what would you say would be the best piece of advice you would give for someone wanting to write a book?
Well, the best piece of advice I'd give is the best piece of advice I received. And I don't know where I got it, who I got it from, where I read it. But what I would do back in my days of I want to write a book, I'm going to write a book, I have all these ideas in me, and I've got all these books I want to write, and I could never do it. And what I discovered was this is how I would write. I would sit down and I would type out the first paragraph. And then I would look at that paragraph and I would go, nah, that's awful. Let me word this differently. Let me change that. Let me fix it. Fast forward a month, the end of the month now. I've got maybe a page. That's all I've got. But it's fine-tuned. Everything's perfect on it. But at the end of the month, I have one page, maybe even only a half a page. So one day I received, whether it was I read it or heard it, advice, just write. Just sit your butt in the chair, write, and edit later. Mm-hmm. And I went, fascinating. That's fascinating. So I did it, and it was marvelous. You just spew out all the words you got in you, you put it on paper, and then at the end, you go back and edit. And that changes and everything, because once you're at the end of that, your story's on paper or on your computer. You have it down. It's no longer stuck in here. You've got it out. Now you can just go back and edit it and fine tune it till it's perfect. And to be completely honest with you, I know this might be sacrilege in the writing community, but I actually prefer the editing process over the writing process. Because, like I said earlier, for me, writing fiction, it's more draining to me. Mm-hmm. When I get to the point where now I have it and I can go back and edit and reword things and fix things and move things around, it's done. So yeah, for me, that's my favorite part. It's done now. It's on paper. I don't have to draw that out of me. And all I have to do is perfect it. It's kind of like sculpting. And you get that rock, and the hardest part is getting all that chiseled off so you can see a form of a body. Mm-hmm. Once that's done, it's like, okay, great. Now all I have to do is sand off the edges. And, it's done. I just have to fine tune it. So for me personally, if I can get to the editing stage, I'm happy.
I would
So that, yeah,
agree.
that's my
Yeah.
my advice is just, if you're struggling with writing, just sit down and do it. And for me as a pantser, it's easy. For an outliner, it might be a little bit more difficult, but you still, it comes down to sitting down and putting it on paper and worrying about editing later.
Yes. I do an outline, but it usually it's like halfway and then kind of like I know the ending and then I can't take it anymore. I have to start writing it. But I agree. It's for me, I would much rather go back and edit than have to, like you said, create from scratch because it does take a lot. And as a kid, I hated that part, editing, because we had to do it by hand. I don't know if you remember, like in
Sure.
school, I didn't like,
Right.
I liked writing, but then the teacher would be like, okay, that was your first draft. Now you can do it again. I'm like, oh, but computer, I mean, it makes it so much easier. So I was
Yeah, I don't know how they wrote
surprised.
books.
I was surprised when I wrote my first book and then went and edited it. And I was like, oh, this isn't, this is actually kind of fun because I was,
Right.
but how can I make this sentence better? So yeah, I totally agree with you on that. Okay, and I have two more questions. Um, so, and this one I'm really interested in because on your website you have a coming soon page and you've actually got like your title and the year of what's coming out like several years in advance. And so I want to know, do you already have those books written or are you just like putting it out there and saying this is what I'm gonna do?
Yeah, I'm being completely presumptuous, actually. Unfortunately, they're not written. I wish they were written. And those dates are going to have to change because usually when I release a book, I take about 6 months off. Well, my writing process is painfully slow. I'm a slow reader, but I'm a painfully slow writer, far more slow writing because I want it to be perfect.
Mm,
And unfortunately, there's a lot of books out there that, especially in the self-publishing world, and at this point, I don't even read self-published anymore. I gave it a good whirl, but there's so many. I'm not saying that there aren't any good self-published books out there. I'm sure there are, but my experience has been that just the quality is not what it is. And so I do take my time to make sure it's done well. I edit over and over. I pay for an editor. I go through all this process so that the product you get is the best. And unfortunately, no matter how hard you try, there's always a
there's
typo
always
that's
something.
hidden in there.
Yes.
Yeah, it's amazing. Your editor goes over it, other people go over it, you've gone over it 1,001 times, and it's there. It's like, how did that happen? But I want the best quality product out there. So for me, um, I spend a lot of time doing that. And so in between books, I kind of exhale because there's a lot of time spent writing, there's a lot of time spent editing, then there's formatting it, getting it ready, getting it published, then there's the, hey, does anybody want to read my new book?
Right.
And
Mhm.
usually I just hear an echo in the valley and that's it. So I try to market, and as each book has come out, I've just been less and less enthusiastic about marketing. um, so all these things just train you. So usually I take about 6 months and I just like don't do it. And in an interim, I'll write nonfiction and things like that, articles and essays. But right now, I have taken a sabbatical from writing the fiction side of it, and I don't know when I'll pick that back up here. Um, Maybe later this year. I don't know. So for me, um, the dates were very positive in my mind of what I was going to do, but
Mhm.
I don't hold me to the years. So I might have to go in there and just take those years off, and when they come, they come.
Yeah. Well, you just life happens. I'm last year I had a book come out and my dad died like the week my book was released and it was like I couldn't even, I mean, I didn't care about doing
Right.
anything. And then like you have all this to process, the months afterwards. So, but I think it's
Yeah.
good to have at least, something in your some sort of like you have an idea of what you're going to be writing about. So
Sure,
yeah.
sure. And time, I mean,
Mhm.
if time was more available to us, then yes, I could actually write more and get more stuff out. But as you know, time is fleeting, and as we get older, it just seems to get less and less. So there's just
And
not
you have
enough
six
hours.
kids.
Yes, yes. So
And there's that.
there's always something going on, and when you live in the South in the summer, there's always stuff growing that has to be cut.
Oh
So
yes.
just you don't have the luxury of just, hey, like some authors that all they do is write. It must be nice, but that's not my it's not my lot in life at this time.
Mhm. Well, where can people find out more about you and your books? Where your website, your social media, where do they go to find out more about you?
Social media, I don't know. I I'm on Twitter or X or whatever it is right now. No traction there. I gave up Facebook years ago. I got frustrated with them when they were curating or curtailing who who can see your posts on Facebook. Like I
Uh,
had my author page, and they
mhm.
were saying, okay, we'll let these people see it, but these people won't. It's like, what's the point of having it? So I
Yeah.
dropped Facebook. I'm on Gab. All of these are under my name, JL Pattison, and but predominantly my website, which is jlpattison.com, is where you can find all those links to those things. I write on Substack, like I said, and it's havenpub.substack.com. I've got various articles and essays on there, but the best place to probably reach me is on my website. You can contact me there, and you can find my links to my other places on there as well. And
Great.
you can buy my books too if you're so inclined.
Yes, buys books through your website or they're on Amazon. Are
Yes,
they?
they are. That's correct.
Yeah.
Amazon and on the website.
On
But
the
you
web.
can't get them autographed on Amazon. You can only get them
Yeah.
autographed for me. So
Yes,
if that's something that's your cup of tea, then there you go.
absolutely. Well, thank you for coming on and joining
You're
us.
welcome.
And I usually just pray us out, and
Sure.
that's it. All right, so I'm
Okay.
gonna pray real quick. Dear Lord, I thank you for this day, Lord, and I thank you for JL coming and sharing his wisdom on writing and his author journey. And I just pray, Lord, that you help it to be a blessing to those who hear it, be with our members who couldn't be here tonight, Lord. And we just thank you, Lord, for all your blessings. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you for the opportunity.